On the show today, we have Shay Dunn and Rich Walters. How are you guys? And welcome to the show.
We're good. How are you?
Great, great. Um, so tell us about your story. I know you have a Facebook group, and it's called From Prison to Purpose.
Mhm.
And so tell me how you came up with that, and what's your group all about?
Well, I was in active addiction for about 10 years of my life. Um, and obviously, we all know that, when you're in active addiction, you lose everything. And I ended up in prison. And whenever I was in prison, I was introduced to the 12 steps and I met my sponsor. And I got close with God and it changed my life. And whenever I came home, I was just a fire had been lit in my heart to help tell others that there's a way out. So we started the page, and then the same court that sentenced me, I actually work with today, and it's just taken off.
So do you do the kind of same things that people provided you? Do you kind of help people out there in those same situations?
Yeah, I feel like if somebody, because we all go to psychiatrists and doctors and they want to tell us something, but when you feel like someone's never lived it, it's hard to listen to them. So I feel like if I had someone that, spoke my language that says, I've been there, it would have helped me a lot more. So I get to go and I get to teach them classes. I'm a peer supporter there, so they can call me if they're struggling at all. And basically, I just use my story to help them and direct them into a better way of living.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking you, like what kind of drugs were you addicted to, and what age did you start doing that? And did you start doing that because of friends, or how did you get in contact with that?
Well, it was in high school. I fell
Okay.
in love with the bad boy, and he did stuff. He was a little bit older than me, so I'd start doing stuff with him. I started with drinking, and then prescription pills and Adderall. I did a lot of Adderall in high school, and then ultimately I ended up on heroin and cocaine and the harder things.
Right. And do you think a lot of this stuff comes uh, from families? I mean, because I know there's people who like their parents also did like meth or heroin and stuff like that, and they kind of like. But in your case, it was mostly people from school, right?
Well, my father hid it for a very long time. My freshman year, I have two sisters. One's younger and one's older. We were very popular in school. We were very athletic. We got good grades. My freshman year of high school, though, my dad went to prison for drugs. So I think he was an addict that hid it well my entire life. But my older sister went off to Ohio State. She had a full ride scholarship. She never did drugs. My younger sister will probably be the valedictorian of her high school class. And it was different for me. Whenever my dad went to prison, it deeply affected me, and I got made fun of in school, and I
Right.
felt like I had to defend him. And then I think I just started acting out after that.
Right. And what do you think about the epidemic of fentanyl? Do you think that kind of makes everything worse, where people could die quicker, right? Because it's more
It's
potent.
so scary to the point where, when someone isn't ready to get help, basically, it's we're here when you need us, and we hope you're carrying Narcan, because
So for
it is.
those who don't know, what is Narcan?
Do you want to explain that, Rich?
Yeah, it's something that reverses the effects of a opioid overdose.
Okay, so someone's overdoses on heroin. What is it, like a tablet or an injection, or what is that?
Typically used as a nasal spray.
Oh, okay. And so that essentially kind of like, what does it do? I've never heard of that.
It just brings you right out of the overdose immediately. Now, some situations people are so far gone that it'll take multiple doses of Narcan just to bring them back to life. I've actually heard of situations where they've had to hit a person with 20
Wow.
plus times with Narcan just to bring them back on just one overdose, obviously.
And so do people buy these? Can someone just buy them, or is it something that emergency people give out when?
Well, obviously EMS carries it, but typically when it's handed out in the communities, it's handed out because nonprofits and various grassroots organizations will raise enough money to then buy it from like Narcan distributors, and then they'll pass it out to their communities.
Right. Um, and why do you think there's an epidemic with drugs? Do you think it's it's because the mental institutions kind of have been closed down, and instead of using the mental institutions, we're using prisons now to treat people. Why do you think there's so many people on drugs nowadays?
It's just become so common. I can only speak from my experience that I thought I was better than, and I thought the addicts were just, you know, grungy looking people that were always like that. I guess I didn't ever think of I wonder where they started out. So I never connected the two, that if I'm willing to try substances, then I'm taking a chance of becoming an addict. So I think it's really, mental health, lack of education, lack of compassion, the effects of other generations that were addicts, and now they have trauma. There's a lot of trauma in children that grow up to be addicts.
Right.
A lot of women have had sexual abuse that end up being addicts.
Right. I feel like it's almost like alcohol. It's just a way to cope, and I guess that's just the next level of coping.
I genuinely, back then, I genuinely didn't think that I was capable of being happy. It was self-medicating. I just wanted to escape reality. I didn't know how to deal with my feelings. I was very impulsive. And the same way people have, eating disorders or self-harm, it's just a different way to escape your feelings.
What you got to understand is an overwhelming majority of the population of heroin users started off with legal prescription pills.
I was going to ask that.
Prescribed to them by a doctor. And so that didn't help any, that kicked it off.
Right. I've met people who got like a back injury and started taking pain meds, and got addicted to them, and then they couldn't pay for them anymore. They couldn't find them anymore, and you're right. They moved into to heroin, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened was they started putting the doctors under so much pressure because the overdoses were starting to become so prevalent with prescription pills that the doctors had then put restrictions on all the on all their patients, and they stopped giving out as many pain pills. And then, when that happened, the price of pain pills skyrocketed through the roof because now supply's down and demand's still there. And as soon as that happened, heroin just came in at the exact same time. It was a perfect storm, and it was cheaper, it was stronger, it was more bang for your buck, and it was everywhere.
So let me ask you this. If someone does suffer from chronic pain and they can't get the pain meds from the doctor, is heroin? It's kind of a controversial question, I guess, to ask. Is heroin a way to relieve your pain if you do it in a responsible way, or do you think just heroin itself, the way it's made, maybe it's not as pure, or something's wrong with it? Is it not good, even if you're
unless it's pharmaceutical grade and it's being produced at a pharmaceutical company, you don't know what you're getting these days. So there's rarely, and it's you can ask just about any law enforcement, there's rarely straight bags of heroin anymore. So when they're busting people with these drugs and they're testing them, there's just a multitude of different substances within that bag of heroin. It's a ton of different things. And so there's, good luck trying to find pure heroin. It really doesn't exist anymore. And the sad fact about it is that pure heroin just isn't getting it done to the everyday user anymore now, because now they have a tolerance to fentanyl, and so they're wanting something stronger.
Right. And so, I mean, what do you guys think is the solution to eliminate or at least reduce drug addiction? Have you guys ever thought of on a societal level? Like if you had the ear of a certain senator, what would you guys say to them?
Well, to be quite honest, we have a bunch of different. Yeah. It's okay, so we know what works for us, and we believe it could work for, we know it can work for anybody else who's willing. Which is we got sober through 12-step fellowships. But with that being said, there's a bunch of different ideas out there. One of our best friends, he's convinced that the legalization of all drugs is the way to go, the same way Portugal did. And then once you do that, you take the black market value out of it, which essentially takes the cartels out of it. So now you have the crime rate dropping. And then people are literally just buying drugs from the store at pharmaceutical grade for pennies on the dollar. And at least they know what they're getting at that point in
Right,
time.
kind of like the
Um,
cannabis decriminalization. Um,
well, how well
I don't
did
know.
that
What do
work?
you guys think? Do you guys think it
Well,
was a good idea or not?
well, I mean, think about it. The war on drugs is a failed war. I don't think anybody can deny that. I think it's been a completely failed war this entire time. And essentially, what it is, it's a war on addicts. And what they've done is they've made the prison systems profitable. And they filled them up with addicts who, let's face the facts, jail and prison don't treat drug addiction. Jail and prison doesn't treat alcoholism. It doesn't treat the underlying issues that is wrong with the person.
What are the underlying
Okay.
issues that people usually have? What do you guys think?
Mental health issues.
Well, there's a lot of different things. It could be mental health issues. It could be trauma. It could be some sort of spiritual sickness. I mean, there's a bunch of different things, and then there's people who just accidentally got addicted, who was prescribed pain
Right.
pills by their doctor, and the next thing you know, they are hooked, and they don't see any way out. And there's a lot of things that factor into this where we're from. We're from West Virginia, where it's a poor state. The economy is in a toilet. There's hardly any jobs. And so these are areas like in the Mid Ohio Valley that's been hit the hardest. These are areas that at one point in time had a lot of middle class America. Okay, they had a lot of plant jobs. They had a lot of factory jobs. They had a lot of steel mill jobs. They had jobs where a guy could come in and make $50,000 to $80,000 a year, raise a family, own a home, have a couple of vehicles, and retire comfortably. All those jobs left and went overseas, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. And so now you have people growing up into this area where you have two choices. You're going to be either wealthy or you're going to be on welfare.
And so all those jobs went to China, right? I mean, that's pretty much the consensus on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so you create a hopeless state, a hopeless area for people, and an area where people had an out. They had an end game. They had something to look forward to, graduating high school. And they had jobs that gave them dignity. You know what I mean? They felt good about making a living. They were proud to work for these plants, these factories. I mean, these are blue collar guys. This is the thing that built America. And then you take all that out, and you have nothing but you have a lot of hopelessness.
Right. It sounds like just really at the end of the day, poverty and mental illness and all that stuff that comes after that. And with the current administration, right, do you think some of those jobs have come back to the area?
Well, I think one of the things that's came back to the area that's been most helpful, and a state like ours that's so full of natural resources, and also Ohio, you got the oil gas, you got the oil and gas and all residual minerals industry, that takes place. So now you have a bunch of pad site jobs. Now you have truckers who can drive the brine to the pad sites. Now you have pipeliners, and you have unions that are all out here trying to work on this oil and gas stuff. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't replace the hundreds of thousands of jobs that went missing.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like a very difficult situation. It's economic, poverty, mental illness, and I think my opinion seems to be like they shut down lots of those mental institutes, the psych wards, if you want to call it that. And I think they're using prisons to kind of do that now, right?
What? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So whenever I was in prison, I didn't get like a recovery program. I mean, really, sometimes I look back and think, how did I make it through that? How did I make it through those living conditions and literally being treated like you are not a human being? So I think like sending someone to prison when they need compassion, and instead you make them feel like they're an animal. And then even after I got home from prison and I was on parole, and my parole officer was not well educated. I was working for my court system, and he literally, I had been sober for years. I had never done anything wrong. He told me he was bumping up my supervision because I go to meetings that drugs are easily accessible to me. And I mean, I had to have the people that I work for like have my back to get me off parole. They're so just uneducated about it. And all of my were non-violent drug
Right.
charges,
It sounds
you
like
know?
also poverty. It's like a vicious circle. You poor, then you can commit crimes, or you do drugs, then you commit crimes, and you keep going back and forth.
And prisons are for profit, you know, like there is money there. So somebody is making
Right.
money off
They have
everybody
contracts
that
for the
goes to
uniforms
prison.
and for the food and all that stuff. And if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking you, it might be private, but what were you put in jail or prison for?
Um, Possession, traffic, all drug charges.
What was your scariest experience being in there?
Um, well, actually, I never got in a fight with an inmate, but there was a guard that I was very scared of, and he would come into the bathroom when I was in there alone. I remember calling home and crying to my mom, saying that I was,
So they have
very
male
scared.
guard females in prison?
Yeah,
Wow, that's kind
yeah,
of weird, isn't it?
absolutely. And he would like clear out the bathroom and say it was closed, and I would be the only one in there. And I remember just like
Yeah, that's strange.
panicking, like I
Yeah,
was scared.
some people make the case
Yeah.
that, well, you know, if you're on drugs, if you go to prison, you'll come off of drugs because there won't be any drugs in there. But there's drugs in prison too, though, right?
There are definitely drugs in prison. Thank God I had just changed my ways before I ever got there because I was in my jail for a while. But yeah, so that's most of the drama and you know all that stuff. There's definitely drugs they get brought in by the CEOs. Have you ever seen Orange is the New Black?
Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of is like that. And fun fact, the woman that wrote that went to the same prison that I went to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she went to Maryville.
She was an inmate in that prison.
Yep, she comes back there and teaches a class about writing.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of helpful.
Yeah.
So if you guys come, if you guys come in contact with someone who's like been on heroin for like 3 years and meth, and you guys want to help them, I've noticed. I mean, not everyone. I'm not going to generalize everyone, but I've noticed some people who are addicted to this stuff. They want help, and they stop for like a few months, and then they have like a struggle in their life or a crisis, and they fall right back into that. How can people stop that? What are the best resources people can go to? Because I know you guys are out in West Virginia. What if there's someone else in another city, another state? Like what's the best options for them? You guys think?
Well, we have resources all over. So I guess if they had been sober for a couple months, I would ask them, you know, are you going to counseling? Are you going to meetings? Do you have a fellowship? Do you have a church? I would call and speak with them. If they're detoxing, we would get them into treatment and detox. A lot of the times, it's moms reaching out to us for months first, crying and crying and crying. And then finally, usually someone has like a moment of surrender, something happens. But if you just get sober and you're just white knuckling it and you're just left alone with yourself, that's very hard to do. Very few people just recover on their own and say, I'm never going to pick up again. You have to have a fellowship, you know, of people that are helping you through it, you know. And that's where we see the most sobriety at, is people that are very involved in recovery and very involved with their community.
And what would you say to someone who came up to you and said, hey, I used to be a heroin addict 10 years ago. I just got in a car accident and they want to give me opioids for my pain relief?
Well, there's going to be situations in your life where you can't avoid it, I suppose. Like, suppose you break your back or something like that, and it's like, it's needed. What I'd say is that, God forbid, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that that happened to one of us, right? And what I would do is, at all costs, I would try not to take them. At all costs. Now, if I had to take them, I would have her watch them, or I'd have my sponsor just lives 2 blocks over, you know, so I could have them hold on to the medication and give them to me whenever I needed, and then just pray to God that it doesn't open Pandora's box. I mean, that's where you're at, you know. You're just hoping, because what we're taught is that we have a physical allergy to drugs, and and alcohol, and once we put something in our body, we break out into what is known as the phenomenon of craving, which means we want more and more and more and more. And so that's what you have to be concerned about, whether or not that's going to kick off the phenomenon of craving.
And so that's a great thing that you mentioned right now, where people want more and more and more and more. Do you think that comes from a consumer-based society where we always want more and more and more and more and more?
Well,
Um,
not necessarily, because I've seen people who are social drug users and social drinkers, and they can moderate. I was never one of those guys. Once I got started, I was off, man. I was getting rocked. It never mattered. It didn't matter what it was. And there's other people who can just like successfully use drugs moderately, and I was never that guy. It just consumed me.
My sister understood the disease of addiction a lot better, because she realized that she had a very close friend in college that would, on weekends, try like hard drugs, not just like, easy drugs, but like very hard drugs. And then, Monday would come and he wouldn't do it for months and months and months. It was never a problem to him. You know what I mean? And then she's like, that was never the case for my sister. So if you don't have that addiction in you, you could periodically use just for fun,
right. So it sounds like it's something to do more with the person, right? It's not like an addictive personality disorder, it almost sounds like. So it could be food, it could be cigarettes, it could be booze, it could be anything really. And so
Yeah.
so I guess these treatment centers, do they help on the psychological aspects of addiction too?
Well, so what they do is, let's face it, everybody's out there selling their treatment center like it's the cure all and it's the greatest thing in the world, right? The
Right.
fact of the matter is, all their success rates are the same. All their outcomes are the same. I don't care what anybody says. And the truth of the matter is, you just have to give the patient as much love and care as possible. Do I favor a small treatment center over a big treatment center? Yes, I do, because patient care is a lot better. It's more personalized. It's more intimate. You're going to get a lot of more one-on-one time with your therapist and so on and so forth. But what happens is treatment's just a spin dry. All right, you're going to be spin dry. You're going to spin dry from all substances, and then you're going to do some heavy therapy work. You're probably going to open up some things that you haven't opened up. Some wounds that you haven't opened up in a while. You're going to talk to people about them. It's what you do after treatment's what's going to keep you sober. It's what you do long term that's going to keep you sober. Treatment is the greatest beginning to your journey. You have to do it. Remove yourself from society. Be there. Come off of everything. Completely dry out. And then, as a family member, you just got to hope and pray that they have some sort of moment of divine intervention or moment of clarity or entire psychic change or something takes place while they're there. Otherwise nothing's going to change, because they got to be willing to want to seek recovery after treatment.
Right. And do you think religion helps? Going to church helps? Do you think that helps too?
I wouldn't necessarily say religion. What I say, I think a spiritual way of living is the way to go. Fact. A lot of addicts and alcoholics run from the idea of religion. It works for some of them. It does. It works for some. There's no one size fits all. There's many different paths to people's spiritual well-being, so to speak. And if yours is going to be a very strict religious program, rock on. But whatever it is that makes you happy and contented and keeps you completely off the drugs and sets you free from all your negative emotions and all this junk that you've been carrying around your whole life, by all means, continue to do it.
And do you think removing people that person has done drugs with before is an important part of recovery too?
Well, I think that's something that just happens automatically. Like when I got sober and I came back from treatment and I was involved in the 12-step process, the guys I was using drugs with and stuff didn't want to hear me talking about prayer and meditation.
There you go.
You know what I mean? They didn't want to hear me talking about service work.
Right.
They didn't want to hear me talking about the big book and alcoholism and the phenomenon of craving and the mental obsession.
Right.
So they kind of just fall off on their own. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
But I think it's essential. Yeah, you don't want to be around people actively getting high or drunk all the time.
But I do always tell people when you're ready to join us, it's not that I think I'm better than you. It's not that I don't remember where I came from. I'm just not willing to cross that line and sit with you, you know what I mean, while you're using. But when you're ready, like I'll come back and get you and pull you out,
Right. So if there's a person who's been addicted to heroin for, like I said, my same example, for 10 years, and then you put them in front of a table and you put heroin in front of them, do you think that's a good way to help them not do drugs, or kind of like the exposure therapy? I know it sounds controversial and weird, but I like to think of weird things sometimes. What do you think?
I've never experienced it. I've also never heard of anybody else experiencing it either. I can't say I understand where you're going with it, and it seems like it could be effective, maybe to some people, but to a lot of people, they're just going to sit there and they're going to drive themselves nuts obsessing over it.
Right.
And then other people have just been placed in this position of neutrality where they could just sit there and not have to worry about a thing, right? Because they know, like they finally been restored to sanity and sane mind to where they know that if I pick that up, I know what's happening at this point in my life. I'm not going to be a fool to think that it's going to be any different this time.
Right, because I think about alcoholics. Alcoholics, when they stop drinking, they still go to family events, and there's beer there and wine, and so it's kind of like it's a struggle. They have to like learn to say no and block it out of their head.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining the show, guys. And where can people find more information about both of you?
They can come follow me on Facebook. It's From Prison to Purpose. Also, my personal page is Shay Dunn, so they can find me there and my story and all kinds of resources and anything else.
And you can find me on Facebook too, or on Instagram as Rich Walters. It's just my name. If you ever need any help or anything like that, anybody who's suffering from drug addiction or alcoholism, please message us or give us a call. My phone number is attached to the page, and we'll do everything in our power to help.
Thank you, guys. It's been very informative.
Thank you so much.
You have a good night.
All right, bye.
Peace.